Welcome back to our next session, The New Normal. What will businesses' role be like in the new society? The pandemic has presented major challenges for retailers, adapting workplaces, supporting remote workers, furlough schemes and redundancies. So many in the retail industry have stepped up to help employees and communities, from rolling out new benefits and programs and helping their colleagues navigate the pandemic, to playing a role in the communities they serve. They've led with huge purpose and empathy. So how will businesses collaboratively continue along this path and provide hope for the future of retail? Here to discuss this and more, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Helen Dickinson, the Chief Executive of BRC, and on camera by Sach Kukadia, Chairman of ReHaus and Director of Residently, and Nick Beighton, Chief Executive Officer of Asos. Hello all.
Hello.
Helen, maybe if I can start with you. It's often said that the worst of times brings out the best in people. How have you seen the retail industry respond? And do you think that that's a truism that is reflective of how the sector's responded over the last 12 months?
Without any doubt. If it casts our minds back to whatever it is, 15 months ago, and the real sense of emergency and panic that the country was going to run out of food and the resilience of our supply chains wouldn't withstand this complete unknown that was going to affect all our lives. And if you think of all the things that have happened in the subsequent period, from making sure that vulnerable people got fed, people being in the front line day in, day out, really gearing up our digital capabilities such that that became our lifeline for all of us as members of the public over the course of all of this time. So I think everybody in retail, from the person who drives the van or is in the shop or has been in and out of furlough, because that's also been difficult, right up those organisations has really stepped up to the plate, and I think the industry stands in higher regard now than it did before March 2020.
Yeah. Nick, what about you? As a leader of a business employing thousands of people, was there an added sense of responsibility that you had to react in the right way?
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, I support everything Helen's just said. When the pandemic first hit us, it was originally a supply problem, then a demand problem, and then a threat to business and threat to lives that we hadn't conceived. So we had to sit down and ask ourselves, how will we lead through this? What will we do? And we set out, the first thing we all said to each other is, well, we'll get through this. We don't know how yet, but we're going to have to step up and do things differently. And the Asos team responded beautifully with this. We lent into many charities. We clothed NHS workers. We sent samples to various trusts. And we did this without really asking. People wanted to do it. So I was delighted that we did all of those things. And it wasn't just monetary value. We gave just shy of £1 million to various charities on the back of it. We donated laptops to children in deprived areas so they go through schooling. All of these things were people asking us and pushing us to do it. But it wasn't just people under our noses. Regrettably, there's an awful lot of orders had to be rearranged and cancelled. And we then took the difficult decision to go, we're going to stand behind all cancellations and make sure we pay the workers who have and the suppliers, because there's vulnerable people at all ends of the supply chain. So I'm delighted that Asos were able to do all of those. And just to round it off, through every moment of stress, I always get surprised by positives and negatives, way more positives than negatives. And I think overall people did lean in and did recognise we're in the middle of a pandemic that might change things for a long time.
Sach, what were your reflections?
I mean, it's really good to hear, Nick, what Asos did, because, I mean, the experience that I had was quite different in that, we weren't and don't employ, thousands of people. All of the businesses that I'm involved in are, early or mid stage and, are growing at relatively fast rates, or most of which have also raised funding from different institutions. And, one of the first things that I noticed, if you separate business from the question, which is, in the times of pandemic, does the worst times bring out the best in people? I think outside of business, I mean, we as humans are actually quite a kind species, right? It's in our nature to help each other. And it's only because of certain things that exist that cause people to change that view. In business, however, and in all of the businesses that, as I say, I'm involved in, we, like all of the boards and all of the investors suddenly said, there's no more money. We need to find a way to keep business alive. You need to cut costs if needs be. You need to maintain a certain level of momentum. And it's all about survival. This isn't about, and it's very difficult in that situation to behave like, for example, Nick did, which is such a beautiful thing, because you don't have the resources and the financial sort of support to be able to do that. So in our position, it was actually quite ruthless. I mean, there were a bunch of decisions that weren't particularly very nice or favorable for people that worked within the businesses. And, looking back, could we have done anything different? I genuinely don't think so. I think at that point it becomes, what's the most important thing as a director of the board, which is, to maintain that the company is doing everything we can for the business. And some of those decisions, as I say, were not particularly positive, unfortunately.
Yeah, indeed. And I suppose that really speaks to the nub of this session, I guess, which is that as we come out the other side of this, and there's an opportunity potentially to reset, but also I suppose there's going to be a sudden drive to get the economy started again, to get cash coming back through to tills, etc. How are businesses going to strike the balance between that need to drive profits, recover lost income from the last 12 months, and hold on to some of the things that we, I suspect, hold quite dear out in these difficult times, as that extra sense of community, that opportunity to grasp purpose. And from a holistic point of view, from an industry, how do you strike that balance?
I think it's, as Sach said, there's some real difficult decisions that people have had to make. I've spoken to so many people over the past months who've had real dilemmas on their hands. Even before the Prime Minister stood up on the 23rd of March last year and told everybody to stay at home, there were businesses that closed before that because they knew that was the right thing for their people and their customers at that point. And there's, examples right throughout of, the whole sort of feeding vulnerable people. That was if the government says you should, or people working with government say, we're encouraging everybody to do that, you sort of look at the economics of it and go, how does that work? So again, it's a societal question versus the bottom line. Every single thing and every single step I think that businesses have taken, they've had to sometimes weigh up those two things. And I guess the sort of purpose question is, are they two sides of a different coin, or are the businesses that actually are sort of driven by that higher sense of purpose, the ones that actually at the end of the day will become more successful in the long run? And I sort of completely appreciate what Sach is saying. Sometimes the need is so, you're fighting for survival, and therefore it is it is perhaps a straight equation. But overall, I think hopefully we've shifted the dial in terms of not necessarily thinking that they're two opposites, but actually they, businesses that do the right thing or can do the right thing more often will be those businesses that in the longer term are more successful.
And Sach, just interested in picking up on one of the points that you made towards the end there, the decisions you made early in the pandemic to sort of keep the businesses going, and you say some of them were quite brutal. How has your what you've been through over the last 12 months, what the country's been through, society's been through the last 12 months, has it made you change your view on the purpose of business or the importance of purpose going forward now? And as you look to build back as the economy starts to open up, do you think you'll do anything differently now?
It's a really interesting question, because my view on how I was running my business previously to how I'm about to start running my businesses now is very different. And a really good example is, if prior to the pandemic I was asked, would you, and I did actually, I think this is a true statement, is that I had inquiries made by members of staff who wanted to work more than 1 day a week from home. And 9 times out of 10, I would never have allowed it, because unless it was a maternity or there was, a real personal issue, my view was you have to be in the office because you're not going to be able to work from home efficiently. And what I've noticed from a personal perspective, but also with every other business that I have a participation in, the efficiency levels for the majority of people has gone up. And my view is that you've got certain things that exist in the day, for example, a commute, which some people may enjoy, some people may not enjoy, but the point is it breaks the day. And where I'm working now I wake up, I'm on my desk by 7:38, and I'm working all the way through till 10, 11 p.m. at night, and I'm eating with the laptop open, and I'm just doing a lot more. Now, that's me. And I've also noticed that, people that I'm working with feel the same way. So, I think what's important as business owners and, for any leader in this world now is to think about how can I exploit and optimize the efficiency levels that exist within the team. And also, in terms of, OPEX, right? Like if you don't need to have as much space we had a huge amount of space when we were running our business out of Notting Hill, and thinking now, could we have reduced that space? And moving forward, would I want to occupy the same amount of space and instead maybe have a rota system with people coming into the office? I could cut my office costs down by a third or maybe even half, but still maintain a certain level of efficiency. That for me is something that people probably should start thinking about. And rather than dwell on what the past looked like, I think it's important to understand where the opportunities lie moving forward. And, grasping that, because things are going to change, things aren't going to go back to the way they were. And, provided that you, as a leader, can see those opportunities and perhaps make it work favorably towards your balance sheet, then, why can't it be positive?
Absolutely. Nick, you spoke about leaning into some of the issues that you as a large organisation could help with at a societal level. Is that way of working and that way of thinking now becoming ingrained at Asos, or is this something that will end up being rolled back as we come out the other side and return to something more resembling normal?
No, it won't be rolled back. Asos, we describe ourselves as purpose-driven, mission-led, guided by values. Our purpose is to give people the confidence to be whoever they want to be, which is through our product, our experiences, and inspire and engage our customers through it. My role as a leader, and all the leaders at Asos, is actually to apply that purpose to our people. So it's the same purpose in and out. So it's woven in our fabric and woven in the way we do things. Our values are to be authentic, brave, creative, and disciplined. And our mission is to be the world's #1 destination for fashion-loving 20-somethings. And that restlessness is what keeps us going. And that restlessness needs to be applied to different scenarios, different circumstances along the way. There's always bumps on the road, and those bumps on the road are just bumps and not forks. You just have to be in the moment to recognise them as they come along. And in terms of our purpose and our mission, our values will stay. One of the things we did during the pandemic is once we'd got to a certain point, we kind of tore our business plan up, and we went, everything we thought is no longer going to be relevant. Everything we thought might be relevant, but which bits are? And we then came up with a few things that we wanted to apply going forward. We wanted the organisation to be more agile, to be leaner, to be more financially robust. And we wanted to double down on sustainability and contributing to our customers' purpose, our customers' lives. So they became the things we doubled down on, and we wrote a new business plan on the back of it. So I actually think it's ingrained even more, Chris, and we won't be coming back from any of those principles that we talk about regularly. It's ingrained in how we do something. Kind of comes down to our fashion with integrity. It's people, planet, products, packaging, all those things, and the way we do things is really, really important.
Absolutely. Sach, coming from it from an entrepreneurial's point of view, as you say, running smaller businesses, has this changed your outlook on the role that business should play in our lives in general, in society?
So my view on a personal level, has changed drastically. I sort of lived and breathed everything about what I did with business when I was running secret sales, and that's all I thought about for 10 years. And it had its highs and it's had its lows, and I always put business first. And I think what's happened now is that whilst business is still the biggest priority in my life, I'm balancing that with certain life pleasures that I wasn't able to do before. Like even just spending time with my fiance, albeit whilst I'm working at home, is a beautiful thing, right? There were parents who probably didn't see their children that much when they were working. And then all of a sudden the pandemic comes along and they've spent the most amount of time with their families, and they probably have started to realize, well, that's something I don't want to change. And, if you can ingrain some of these changes into your life and do so positively and still, have the output, technology is a beautiful thing. And we've been able to really see how that can support us in our lives. I feel, I'm the sort of person, well, I will always welcome change, and I will always, find a way to make things work. And I think, it's harder for other people, and particularly when you're big businesses, it's not easy to suddenly, ask everyone to work from home and deliver the same levels of efficiency. But, provided that you understand what's important to you as a person, and what you want out of life, which doesn't have to just be in the office and working. There is a way to balance things, and I think the pandemic has really shown that to me and to a lot of other people.
Helen, the stuff that Sach is talking about at a personal level in terms of the balance between work and life, the things that Nick is referring to with regards to the new sense of purpose at Asos, all kind of speak to this idea that we've got this opportunity to build back better. But what do you actually think that means from a business point of view? I mean, what are we actually talking about when we talk about the phrase of building back better from a business point of view?
Well, it's interesting because over the last couple of months, I've been doing some interviews with many of the chief executives of retailers that are within the BRC, because we're looking at our own strategy because our latest 3-year plan ends at the end of June. And all these areas around the sort of ESG agenda.
Yeah.
So people talk a lot about the environment and climate action and the road to net zero. People talk a lot about people. Retail has always been a people business, and how you support the mental health, the well-being of people within the business, how you build their skills and their capability for the future, and do more around diversity and inclusion in its broadest sense across the industry. That these are all things that people, when I ask, what are the big things that you're worried about in the future, they're all things that come up. And I think this Build Back Better term is sort of bandied around like it's like a sort of badge of, let me say, let's build back better, shall we? As if we all know what it means. So I think while we've got some big subject areas, some big themes that the industry feels now much more compulsion to coalesce around, the big question is whether or not we can get that coalescence, we can get that collaboration, because actually moving the dial does require some positive actions on the part of a lot of people. So we're beginning to see that, but that's the question mark for me. Making those things, making them stop be the answer to a survey question and turning them into some form of reality.
And what's the view of government? You're dealing with government all the time. What's the view of government of the role of the private sector and business with regards to this sort of chance to reset social health, not just the economic sort of recovery of health within the UK, but the public health of UK as well?
To be frank, at the moment, I don't think they have much of a view, because I think at the moment the government machine is very stretched in dealing with the direct and immediate consequences of the pandemic. The Chancellor's got a £300 billion hole to fill. The Department of Health has got an NHS that requires a lot of investment and change to be fit for the future. And every other department, I think, is just focused on dealing with the immediate consequences of the pandemic. So I think government's job here is to create the right environment to facilitate and enable the private sector. And I think the retail industry has got a great part to play and a real opportunity here. So government just it needs to create that environment, not get in the way. And if there are some policy levers that need to be pulled, then they should pull them. But I think if we wait for them to set the strategy, then I think we might be here for a long time. So I think the onus is on all of us to really start that, or to, for some, I think they're already on that journey, but to really build some momentum around it.
Yeah. Nick, in terms of someone who's leading a strategy very much in that area, one of the things I think that we've seen significantly over the last 12 months is quite how important work is, organisations' work in individual health. But where does the line get drawn between where your responsibility lies as an employer in somebody's health, where the government and society's role lies in providing access to healthcare, and where the individuals need to take control of their own health, do you think? Where do you guys draw the line?
That's a really good question. I actually think there's a personal responsibility on individuals, and there's also an employer responsibility to guide and step in if necessary. I think government should set a framework of principles, but it's down to personal responsibility, employer responsibility, and actually humans being kind to each other. If you see someone, a few weeks ago, we published a post on stopping Asian hate, and I wrote it, and the letter went, or the note went something like, as a father, a leader, and an ally, these are the things we need to all do. And ally becomes the key one here. So we're all allies, and so we can all help each other out if someone's struggling. But I think there's a personal responsibility on individuals, and actually an ally responsibility on colleagues, employers. I feel less leaning into the government on all of that. I think government should definitely set principles, but I just think it's more a team, individual, employer responsibility.
I see. And Sach, what are your views on that? What role does business play in public health, do you think?
I think I agree with everything that Nick and Helen have said. It's quite apparent that people, generally speaking, are just very conscious now of mental health and all of the things that go along with that. And it's quite challenging as an employer to truly understand, some of the feelings or emotions of people that work within the teams, unless those people are vocal. And I think what's important is for any business to create the right forum or the right sort of sense for people to actually, talk freely about certain things, and for the businesses to support them accordingly. And I think that's only headed in one direction. I think that people are learning to accept that they may be feeling a certain way, and transparency and things that you may have hidden in the past are now, without any doubt, being spoken more freely about. And I think it's the job of HR and of the leaders within that business to just ensure that the right level of support is provided. But I think it all stems from initial communication and creating the right forum for sharing.
I just add a bit more to that, Chris. Sasha's right. As a leader, we've got to create the environment for people to legitimately reach out, and we've got to create the channels and the forums where they can. And so that will create an allyship and a support network, so people can feel it's okay, not that it's not okay. Because if people feel it's not okay, that's where really, worrying things could happen.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to build on that, because I think we're all at risk of violently agreeing with each other, but I think that is not necessarily the case. So it's not quite a mental health example, but it's a diversity and inclusion example. So we recently published the sort of state of play on diversity and inclusion across retail. And one of the statistics in there is that 84% of retail businesses have a D&I strategy and are saying that D&I is important, but less than half of employees think the same. So there is a disconnect between what the leadership are saying and what the workforce as a bundle of people think too. So I think that, while we can all sort of sit here and go, yes, that's what needs to happen, there is clearly a gap in leadership across the piece in the perceptions as to whether it really is at the moment. And that's the gap that we need to close.
And how do we do that? Is this something that's got to be done at an individual level? Is it something that needs to be done at a company level? Or, going on to the great work that you're doing around diversity at the moment, do we need to start setting industry-wide standards and then holding people to account?
I think it's all of the above. I mean, as both Nick and Sach have highlighted in their answers, it requires a level of personal responsibility, but it also requires certainly from an employer point of view, engagement to even have the conversation, whether it is about mental health, whether it's about inclusion, because unless people feel comfortable to put their head above the parapet, then perhaps those at the top can sit there in splendid isolation and think that they're ticking every box and that they aren't. I mean, we had over 50 retailers sign up to the Charter on D&I when we launched the report. That number has gone up even since it's been launched. And I think people, want to learn from each other about what that can look like, because it's, like none of these things, there isn't, that's a bad English, but there's no silver bullet. Yeah. It's a lot of things. And I think there is a benefit from people working together and understanding what's worked in one place and what they can learn from each other.
Yeah. Nick, how do you ensure that you're not sitting in your ivory tower at Greater London House, and that this new desire to lean in, do the right thing, address all of this host of CSR issues, whether it's diversity, whether it's in the environment, whether it's mental health, but they actually become ingrained in the way that Asos behaves and runs itself?
Well, it starts before you even arrive at Asos and Greater London House, and you well know there's no ivory towers there, Chris. You used to work there. When you walk before you start, you get a video which is from your line manager and a welcome from me. And that's about making people feel excited and connected before they even walk through the door. Now, the pandemic has changed some of these things, but this is where it will go back to. Every new starter is met by me on a 2-weekly cycle. I do an hour of this is what Asos is about. This is what we stand for. These are the things with a Q&A. And the basic rationale behind that is when they walk out of that room, they understand what Asos stands for. They understand what it's about. They understand the things we do. They understand the things we believe. And I'm just Nick. And I just want it to be just Nick. Actually, it's just Nick B. And then I won't guarantee to remember everyone's names, but I remember faces. So from day one, it's breaking down a barrier to make it feel okay. There are no officers in Greater London House. Everything's open plan. You can walk around the building. You will not know who's the director, who's the buying assistant, who's the finance director, or the CEO, because it's all open plan. And that's the way we've always liked it. But we also then augment that with other channels. There's anonymous call-outs that is Spot. There's regular forums about D&I. We lean on the inclusivity to bring the diversity in. So we double down on inclusivity, and we try to legitimize all of those things. There's a monthly all hands briefing where they can ask questions anonymously. There's an employee forum called In Touch that we set up 4 years ago, where there's representatives chosen by the employees that can interrogate members of the exec on things that are important to them. But we know we need to keep on working on this to get better and better at it, because it's never done.
Absolutely. Look, we're almost out of time. There's one topic I wanted to quickly touch on, which was around financial health. We know there's such a clear link between financial health and mental health. There's a dual line of thinking with regards to the economic recovery at the moment. One, that it might be very up and down, a W shape. The other, that we're going to return to something like the Roaring '20s. I just want to get your guys' thoughts on the recovery and when we come out of lockdown, what the economic situation is going to look like. Sach, maybe we'll start with you.
So I really hope that there is this sort of, roaring period where, the community sort of soars. But if you want my honest opinion, I don't think that's going to happen. And I think it will take probably between 5 and 10 years before you see that anything close to that. And if at all, there is going to be a period of stability that's required. And even though we come out of the pandemic, I don't even think we're going to come out of it immediately. I think, we're going to have restrictions loosened. There is a very strong chance they're tightened again in September, right? And, this is only fixed as a pandemic when it's globally fixed. And by that, I mean, people around the world have all had their vaccines. It's the only time when this will truly be, a bit free. And I don't think that will happen in the next 24 months at the minimum. So this is an ongoing thing. And there's no way that we're going to, in my humble opinion, start seeing any type of, like roaring growth until we find, some stability. And I think what's really good, however, is that as an island and, with our own currency and our own banking structure, there is in place the resource for us to excel and to accelerate and for things to improve, like property prices and areas like that. But I think, and my sense is that there is more than likely going to be a period of trough and then plateau before there's a peak. And I think, I feel that the worst still may be ahead of us, but not long before things will improve.
Thank you. Helen?
The worst is ahead of us, oh no.
I think it could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think one of the features of the pandemic has been the unevenness of those affected. Yeah. So, as of around now, there is about 125 billion, I think is the number of pounds that are in people's bank accounts that they haven't spent over the last 12, 15 months. So if some of that gets spent in this country because, none of us can go overseas, then that in the short term could have a positive impact, certainly on the retail industry. But there are still, portions of society that are, the people that have lost their jobs or have been on furlough and, have not necessarily been able to undertake the selection of jobs that they might have been balancing before, who will still be at the other end of the spectrum. So while the short-term outlook for retail is good, even within the industry, I think there's going to be that unevenness. Yeah. So unevenness across society and unevenness depending on the type of business as to where it might land.
Absolutely. Nick, some final thoughts from you?
Yeah, those are good points from Helen and Sach. In terms of until the pandemic's over, everyone's immune. The world has only solved 1 or 2 diseases. I think smallpox is one of those. Polio might be another in its long history. So we're going to be living with COVID for a while. The pace of recovery will be determined by vaccine rollout, therefore social restrictions and economic stimulus provided to various economies around the world. I think we're going to be in that for the next 12 to 24 months in some shape or form. That said, judging by what happened in 2020, whatever happens from June onwards, it's going to feel like a roaring 2021, if nothing else. So I'm all for that.
I think we're all for that. A roaring 2021 indeed. Well, look, thank you ever so much for your time, Sach, Nick and Helen. It's been fascinating talking to you. Stay safe and stay well and hopefully see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.